little more time getting set up with Pops not around. That's good. We miss you, Pops.
Indeed.
He's my father and cameraman, killing the game.
Absolutely. And lead editor. He edits the big podcast.
He's gotten to the point now where he's doing his thing. He's learned Premiere Pro pretty well. Yeah, it's been good. I didn't choose a topic for today, but there's a lot of things that I've just been working on in general, and a lot of questions that it raises for me, and someone in your role who I know kind of works for and reports to these CIO types, right?
Indeed.
So my company is heavily focused on like this platform engineering story.
Okay.
Right, which you can think of simply as we have developers building apps, and we have all of these kind of shared services that they all need. And in a lot of organizations, you kind of cobble it all together and different teams manage it. Maybe you have a cloud team doing whatever you call the team that's doing that thing, creating the things that developers share that they use to deploy their apps.
Absolutely.
That they don't really want to manage themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what we're adding on top of that, because that's the thing that's always existed, what we're adding on top of that when we say platform engineering is actually consciously designing this to be a system that not just caters to the needs of the developers, but also creates a delightful experience for them as they deploy their applications. As you deploy the application, you're trying to consume infrastructure. You have different secrets that you need to manage. You have different services you need to be able to interconnect. All of these are common problems, blah, 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 blah.
Secrets is always funny, but it's an accurate term. Continue.
Yeah.
Got to manage your secrets.
Yeah, credentials.
Yeah.
Whatever. So we're doing this, and what that becomes, right, if you're doing this intentionally, instead of having all these random shared services that are sometimes managed by one or a lot of times multiple teams across an organization, instead you intentionally build what we call an internal developer platform.
Okay.
Now this concept is beyond my company. The internal developer platform actually has its own movement, but it's aligned with this platform engineering story, right? So the internal developer platform is really what I've been thinking a lot about, because we have all these key items. Like when I think of the things that developers don't want to have to spend their time on, because they want to spend their time building features that align directly to business value. Infrastructure in general is all of those things. Like they don't want to have to really care deeply beyond the initial like kind of, hey, outlining, hey, we may need this much capacity because it's this type of app conversation.
Makes sense.
They don't really want to worry a lot of time about that underlying infrastructure. I want to know how you want me to package my application. We work together to align those standards for how we package that application and get it ready to ship to whatever infrastructure that app is going to live on. So there's a slew of tools that actually make this possible across the entire open source and enterprise software space, right? Just talking about on my side of the fence, right? At my company, we have all these infrastructure automation products, Terraform, Vault for secrets, like Nomad for containers and stuff, and then a bunch like all that, Console for networking, service mesh, blah, 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 blah.
Copy.
But let's take a very common one like Terraform, whereas I have to create some sort of infrastructure, whether that be machines to create clusters, or I have to create a load balancer that's actually handling traffic, blah, 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 and we want to automate those things. Or I have to consume a bunch of cloud services, and instead of going in the console and manually clicking, spin up this, spin up that, and entering in each detail in the form in the cloud console, I can write that as code, blah, 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 blah. Terraform does that. That is an example of a tool that also aligns to a feature, or multiple features really, in your internal developer platform. Are you with me still?
I am.
I feel like I've been rambling.
It's a lot, but I'm with you.
It's a lot. Been rambling. Now, to what I've been thinking about,
Yeah.
right? Because that's great. And what you see in the normal maturity model of this is that companies have no idea a lot of the time that what they're pursuing to build is an internal developer platform.
Okay.
You kind of see this fumbling about, because part of my job is going into a lot of these customers and seeing, hey, what's happening now? What are you doing? How are you leveraging these tools? How are you exposing these features to your developers? What's the process in which they go through to consume the things that you're building, right? Because developers, from my company's perspective, is like the customer of our customer,
Yeah.
right? Because we're talking to these platform engineering personas, which include cloud teams, DevOps teams, all of these teams that have
Makes
different
sense.
names. So, what I'm thinking about right now
Yep.
is, how do you, as a platform engineer, make consuming infrastructure and creating these applications as pleasant as possible? How do you do it in a way that allows me as a developer to come in and pick what I need, pick what I want, and it happens on its own, instead of me having to get 10, 5, 3 approvals that take multiple days at a minimum, weeks sometimes. I can just go in and we set the appropriate boundaries, we set the policies around it that our organization is concerned about,
Yeah.
and they can consume.
And it almost becomes a la carte.
Yes.
Ask for what you need for your application.
Yes. Some companies do this with certain pieces,
Okay.
right? Like, hey, you need a virtual machine for something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You would go to something like ServiceNow, or a lot of companies, because they see like, okay, ServiceNow isn't really what we want to do. They end up developing some type of internal weird form
Okay.
that the development team ends up having to fill out to get something that they need.
Copy.
Okay. That happens a lot, especially in the super big companies. It's these just homegrown internal forms.
Yeah.
And they end up being messy because they're not viewing it as, hey, we're serving our internal development teams as if they are our customer. How do we make our customer happy? They're still thinking, we're IT, we're a cost center. We have to like cut costs, and dev is part of the cost. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that even a thing? And where you're at, is that like what?
But it takes organizational shift to view internal employees as customers of products, because I kind of give it like this illustration, right? If I'm an electrical company and I want to hire the best electricians to come work, it's of my best interest to make sure they have the tools in which they need so that they can serve the customers so that we receive revenue. I used to have a similar situation. I was a contractor for an electrical company, and they would have a whole warehouse full of supplies. I was 1099. You just kind of go check it out and you walk. But you typically find that everything's disorganized, mismanaged. If you don't know, you know, and you might, because you're not aware of how everything is laid out, you're not focused on getting the job out, or you get there and realize there's stuff that you didn't need because you didn't see it, stuff like that. All that to say, the organizational shift, someone has to be responsible for constantly iterating and checking on the developers and the teams, which should happen. And if you're doing large scaled Agile, or if you're doing a smaller version of it, in your IP sprint, whether you're sprinting and you're planning in big room planning or through quarters, or you just have and it's a large misnomer I hate. They call everything sprints, right? But if I got up and started sprinting right now, there'd be an expectation that it came to an end eventually, right? Yeah. I'm sprinting to a goal. And if the goal is MVP, if the goal is a time date, if the sprint is ending as a feature is being completed, it's all fine. But as we look to complete the feature, we need to take the time to look back internally on the team and finding those ways. oftentimes in large enterprises, especially in the scaled method where you specifically book in time your iteration and planning, there's work that we overplan from earlier that ends up getting pushed into that iteration stage, and we never take the time to look in that. So it has to be somebody's responsibility to have that conversation. It's probably your agilist's responsibility. Hey, how do you feel about our current processes? Is it holding you up? Is it bogging you down? Is there a way that we can improve this? How do you feel about the tools that you have at your disposal? Now, depending on the enterprise you work for, the company you work for, you might be locked into certain things. It's fine. Mm-hmm. But is there a way, are we missing functionality that possibly we're paying for, but we're not unlocking, that you may have notice of or understanding of? The conversations need to be happening iteratively, and change needs to result as a result of those conversations, because it's only going to take one or two times where they go, all right, Corey, bringing me back in this room and talk about all the things I would change. And then I walk into this next quarter and then he's going to ask me again, and they haven't changed anything I've brought to them. Mm-hmm. So you have to have the bandwidth and the cover to change the things, develop and trust developers. But that's typically where, at least agile project management, where they slot in that ability to say, hey, you know what I would love? The ability to only choose the thing that I want to do. Hey, you know what I'd love? To be able to not request to have a form to fill out so that I can pull the specific functionality out of this program. And then whether that's me going to test or me rolling up to production, whatever the case may be, now I can function past that. Because while we're rolling in work, while we're sprinting, it's really difficult to have those conversations on both sides, because I'm having conversations with those C-level executives about the status, about changes in scope, about anything that might come from their business dwellings, and your hands-on work.
So I want to stay in there for a second, because my process is, get the developers in the room, get the platform engineering personas in the room, get everyone in the room, and then I can map out what's happening and actually advise on maybe what could happen better, right? But you and your role, like specific title, we say agilist, but it's actually like release train engineer, which I find to be apropos, because you're the one who, I have to pay attention to these human processes to make sure they don't get in the way of this thing releasing. That's how I interpret it.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure there's more. And the reason why I think that that's unique, though, is because now the piece that I want to better understand is when you're talking to the CXO, whatever, and they're like, I need to grade how this team is producing. I need to understand how efficiently we're producing software and releasing it. And these are indicators of it not going well, and this is indicators of it going well. I want to know what that is, because to me, right, as I'm producing, and my goal is to create an internal developer platform, that's what my customer really cares about.
Yeah.
They might not even realize that's what they really care about, because they're focused on features. But they're being graded by these CXOs because the apps that they're working on are either going to make money or save money in some sort of capacity.
Yeah, it's like a NASCAR pit crew. Like, we could have the greatest pit crew in the world. Car comes, tires off, tires back on. But if the drive out back onto the lane is this small, and now the driver has to smoothly come through it so that he don't hit the sides of nothing. However fast we worked on the actual rebuilding and changing of tires don't matter none, because we can only push it through this process at the speed based on it. So although my responsibility is, I know Corey comes and flips the right rear tire, now I have to go, well, it doesn't matter anyway, because if we do this in 30 seconds, it's going to take us a year to get it back out into the street. So to your question, the main things I always wish to bring to those C-level executives is predictability and flow. Because we're going to have to take a look at intake of your work regardless, right? Yeah. We have to take a look at, when you're giving us these large buckets of work that are based on business value, are they accurate? Are they detailed? So that the team has adequate information to work and complete it. So that's always going to be my first step.
But are there specific statistics and numbers that like show that?
Well, numbers on, yes, you can create them. So for us specifically, we use, we've talked about definition of done, definition of ready, X, Y, Z. We talk about features or epics being in the definition of ready phase. And we create a statistic or a number that says, if you're walking into your next quarter or your next planning and you don't have work adequately put out to you, or it doesn't meet the definition of ready, you're failing a metric because you're not giving the team clean burning fuel for them to go out and run the race. We're starting at a disadvantage ahead of time. So that's the first indicator, and that's what that first intake problem solves. Hey, if we can make sure we adequately understand the work and that it's coming through the system, everything else will flow the way it's supposed to.
What you're saying is very powerful, and I want to highlight this for the viewers because what you're talking about right now, and actually if we can understand these numbers better, these indicators better, is what directly impacts time to market.
Absolutely.
These are the things that the CXOs look at and say, yeah, we have these bottlenecks. This feature isn't done yet. It was supposed to be done. Now it's not, right? You as a release train engineer, when you go, and I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but you go and you say, this was supposed to be done last quarter. Now it's next quarter, still not done. You go in and say, why? Why isn't this done? Was it underlying processes that were the issue? Was it, staffing, we didn't have enough engineers? Was it whatever the thing was?
Yeah.
And then what I'm saying at that level is a lot of this happens because of infrastructure problems.
I can believe it.
That's my assertion.
Dog.
Some other team somewhere, and I want to make infrastructure as easy as possible for somebody because I'm not talking about like just the machines. Yes, that's part of it. I'm talking about anything that a development team has to jump to another team for to depend on them for something is underlying infrastructure of some sort for their application.
Absolutely. I've been in positions where a team has been working on a feature, and for whatever reason, the last 2 sprints of said quarter, the testing environment that they have is ripped away from them. So we can't complete any work because it's not like we're going to say, hey, you know what? Let's close the stories. Let's close the development's done. So we can just close it and move on. And no, that's not done if it's not tested. We just talked about definition of ready and definition of done. If it's not tested and we can assure quality, it ain't done. So talking about measurements and metrics, we walk into the next quarter red. Hey, what happened? You said you was going to give us X, Y, Z. Well, remember how we told you at the beginning that we didn't have a test? We think we're going to have our testing environment taken. Yeah, it happened the way we said it would, and this is how it affected our fulfillment. Yeah, but they said the work is done. Yeah, the development is done, but it's not shippable. If it ain't shippable, it ain't done. Because if they can't use it, we can't get paid for it. So I don't know what the conversation we're really having. So that's how it affects the previous quarter. And then you fast forward to the upcoming one. We get our testing environment, sprint 1, a new PI. So what a velocity of a team typically is like 25, 25, 25. It was like 175, 25, 25, 25. Because now I can test those old stories. And now they're getting pushed through the system. So now we're at the end of the second quarter and they're going, well, you guys have been kicking behind. This is awesome. You see, we should push more work on this team. Whoa. Did you not remember the thing we talked about? So that when we focus on that intake metric, and that can be things like making sure it has adequate, we know when it's done, right? Just like to that point, what's the acceptance criteria of the work we're pulling in? What does it look like? What do the tests need to look like? What's true quality of this thing? So that oftentimes what happens with teams on top of the infrastructure issue and having to push it out is they constantly need their product owner. They constantly need whoever's in the business to reiterate on the things that they've been given. They can't just take it and run. I used to coach product owners all the time. It's like you need to have a 10-second or a 10-minute fix at all point in times. If they ask a question, hey, what color was this login screen supposed to be? Green. 10-second fix. We're done. Hey, we needed to connect in with this vendor and we had what was the boundaries? Okay, give me 10 minutes. And then you have any answer you have should be 10 seconds or 10 minutes. So Oftentimes what happens when you don't police that intake of work, that's where the bottleneck kind of shows. And that's the true purpose of Agile, specifically Kanban, which is why they made it visual. If I can see where work is getting held up in this position, I know what's holding my time to market up. So you take it from old Toyota production lines. Hey, when they slap the front doors on, we cool. When they slap the two back doors on, we cool. All these cars are getting held up when it's time to put tires on. Well, who's working the tires? Oh, it's him, and he needs special parts, and he works part-time. And oh, you mean if we just get another person over there, we can get it out? So that's my focus. Finding the bottlenecks by means of the work being visible, and then either eliminating said bottlenecks or controlling work flowing in to the process. Because every bottleneck can't be widened, right? Some things, whether it's regulatory, some things are in places for a reason. Hey, we only release every 4 months. So you know what that means? The infrastructure team is only going to look at our release level work every 4 months. So if I pull up all the work, it's going to say we get through development in 3 weeks, we get through testing in 2 days, and then it sits for 3.5 months before we're ready to push it out. We may not be able to alleviate that bottleneck, but if we know it's there, we can at least have healthy discussions on it as a result.
In your world, what is that 3.5 months? Is that just like policies, or is it like we're dependent on other teams' work?
It could be a little bit of both, depending. Most times it's policies. Large enterprises are not built for fast releases, which is what Agile's built for. So using Agile in these situations is kind of weird anyway. But depending on the size of your enterprise, the whip of that S is so strong that they prefer to be on the back end of the curve instead of at the top of it. So opposed to just constantly iterating and releasing, that might affect too many people. Hey, if we mess this up, even if you can get me new code back in a week, we might lose trillions in the process. We need to make sure this is ironclad before it goes out. So that's what will hold a lot of people back and a lot of places back. And that's what keeps a lot of places safe. So I guess you just have to find the middle ground.
It's an important thing to talk about. I asked that question kind of as a purposeful leading question, just because a lot of the time when we talk about automation or making things faster, which I'm always a proponent of, and I hate things moving slowly, there's the other side that you don't think about when you just are focused on automating, which is what you said. If my company is a bank, financial institution of any kind, any type of massive organization that has a ton of customers fulfilling, even, think of like FedEx, anything at this very large level. If a piece of software gets pushed out prematurely without going through a lot of checks, and then something bad happens, if nothing bad happens, okay, fine, I guess. But when something bad happens eventually, this company loses billions, if not trillions of dollars.
Especially if the company is customer facing. It's like if a FedEx goes down and the scanner's not working because of this new update they pushed, as much as I get to deal with them directly, it's, hey, man, y'all said my package was going to be here on the 1st, and it wasn't. They'd be like, all right, man, we'll get it to you in a few days. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
But think of it like my mother works for the airline. Both my wife and my mother work for American Airlines. If that push gets messed up and my mother can't check somebody into their seat, planes are sitting idle because we can't get them off the ground. Airspace gets held up because we can't get planes in and out of places. And the company reaches very front-facing blowback as a result of that. Now you have to deal with attrition because your gate agents are just like, look, every time y'all push new software, it breaks. I got these ladies screaming at me and asking for hotel accommodations. It's not my fault. I got the FAA down my behind because I can't close out my flights. There's so many things. There's so much impact that comes as a result of it. Now, I am a fan of releasing as often as possible.
Same. Yep.
But that's where I kind of run the streak of, do we need, like, if I release code and I have infrastructure to do so, and I have support to monitor it, I shouldn't be bound on the same schedule as everybody else. Because that's a loss of revenue for the company. If I have a feature that gets pushed out into this application, that feature sparks 10 new clients. It's more money we're bringing in. That's 4 months between cycles. We could have had that business earlier. So you kind of have to run the risk or hey, do we just keep a schedule? Or are we releasing to release, or are we releasing because this might be a security patch? This might be something that we actually need within the moment. And we typically only release out of cycle when there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Which means you have the ability to do it.
Oh, the 100% the ability is there.
So why aren't we
but
not
they
doing
just
it when,
use it break fix. So my technique to have this conversation, because it's a very touchy conversation, and a lot of times with these organizations that have existed for a long time, something happened 50 years ago. 10 years, 20 years, but I'm saying a lot of them 50 plus years ago, that they're like, yeah, that can never happen again.
Fair.
So add this policy.
Yeah.
Makes sense. That's a terrible thing that happened. So what my approach is a lot of time is, oh, okay, so you have this strict, you were releasing once every 6 months to a year. Now, for the last few years, you've been releasing every 3 months. Good job. Okay, now I understand a little bit more of your history, right? What if we talked about trying to get that down to a month and a half?
Gotta have a conversation. See, it's not
Let's
about
talk
change.
about
It's
it.
about getting back to the table.
Exactly. Why are we it's great that we got here. It's working well. We still have some issues.
Well, that's Phoenix Project. That's really. You guys think we could do 10 deployments? 10 deployments? Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can get there, but what I've learned is you can't, in these types of organizations, say we're going to automate everything right away. You can't remove every single manual process right away. You can't remove every single manual approval right away. But there are some that they're okay with.
Exactly.
And you have to, the work is going through the process to find those.
Indeed.
Find the ones that aren't going to cause a lot of pain and friction, the ones that annoy everybody, and we've forgotten why we even do it still, and attack those. And that's what I've seen works, because I've done this now with like almost 50 customers. And that's the thing that ends up resonating with them, because I'm not attacking you now. I'm not attacking what you don't like. I'm not saying that we need to get rid of all these manual processes. Wrong. Yeah, this isn't about right and wrong, okay? This is about the goal that we all have is to release software as quickly and safely.
Efficiency.
Okay? Efficiency is cool. And I'm saying like
shoot
safety.
A high number. Yeah, I want to shoot a high number.
Yeah.
If I'm taking 10 shots, I need 8 of them to be good.
Yeah, safety is critical to actual efficiency.
Absolutely.
So I need you to know that I see you.
Yeah.
And I see the need to be safe. I just want to have the conversation. And when you approach from that, and I think this is critical to the platform engineer's role, platform engineering team's role, this team that's trying to build out, because that's what they end up doing. They end up creating new processes, new things that allow for the delivery of these applications in a safe, secure, and faster way. Right? They need to be masters at going in and dissecting these types of processes, having these difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Or else you're just never going to get anywhere, right? That's what I've seen.
It's real. And here's the rabbit hole I'm going to try to stay away from. Technology as a whole is created to make tasks easier. Like you think, like nobody would think of like a plow as technology, like a single, like a wooden stick and like a metal edge thing on the end of it as a actual piece of technology. But at some point in time, if somebody wanted to dig and plant something, they had to use their hands. So now they were able to actually drop it in and pull it back. They can do more. And then that said, hey, what if we put 10 plows and attach it to one thing and I drag it, we can get more done. Hey, what if we take those 10 plows and attach it to my tractor? And now we got an engine, I can get more done. So that's the very point of technology, is finding ways to efficiently make life easier or more effective. And that's what we do for our customers. That's the purpose of the software that we're building. But you have to find ways to apply that same thought process to everything. How can I utilize the technology I have access to make life easier for my developers, for the business? Because that's what we do with metrics. Can I use this information, make it digestible, massage it so that he can make a decision or she can make a decision as a result of seeing this? And I feel like oftentimes, which goes back to the original point, developers and infrastructure teams are they're not seen as customers. They're not seen as people who need their jobs made easier, because we expect the work they do to make other people's lives easier. And a shift in viewpoint, somebody like a developer advocate, which I think is, you can talk about apropos, like a really sweet thought process, because who's thinking about them? Because you want me to tell you who I think it should be? Should be the Scrum Master. It should be the Agilist on the team. And I say specifically at the team level, because if you're not having conversations with your developers about the pain points, that everything's scalable. When I was a Scrum Master, I walk into a new team. The first question I want to have is, what are your internal and external pain points? What sucks about the team? What sucks about the process? What sucks that we're doing? What sucks that they're doing that we have no control over? Because if I can find one of those to fix, I have buy-in now. They'll get in tune with the rest of the system. I can make us lean, mean coding machines. Same thing happens at the next level. I walk into the C-suite. All right, what are your internal and external levels of dissatisfaction? Oh, the team never delivers on time. Okay. Talk to the team. What's your external? Oh, they always ask way too much of us. Okay. Now you can find those same different processes. But at the team level, you should be going, well, what about the software that we're using? What about the infrastructure? What about our CI/CD pipelines? What are the things that you have access to? Are you talking to other members and other sides of the company? Do they have access to, that's a weird thing too. Do they have access to different tech than we do? Will that allow us to push and scale faster? Okay, so now I have a case to take. Okay, hey, they say if you give us what they have, we can get this out faster. But just saying like everything sucks and I can't do my job and this company's old doesn't help us build a case to get you what you need. So it would be nice if every company had a developer advocate, but that's not going to be the case. And it takes the people, because like I've said before, as a Scrum Master, I'm not responsible for anything. I don't have the vision and I don't have the ability to do the work. And just because they may need technical assistance does not mean I have to have intellectual understanding of the technology they're wishing to implement. I just need to know what it does. I need to know how it helps. I need to know where to go find it. I once I get you the tool, I'll let you figure out everything else.
It's interesting to me that you draw the line between what we're talking about and developer advocacy, because in my mind, I just view it as proper engineering. Like when you're building software, you are doing it, unless you're just a one-man show, amongst a team of people who is part of a larger team of people.
True.
In an organization.
Very true.
Understanding how these people in process work together and why is the thing that's going to give you the ability to build whatever it is you're trying to build in an efficient and safe way. You can, unless, like, I love the freedom of just being by myself and writing code and building what I want and using whatever services I want. And that's great because I get to make all of those decisions and trade-offs.
Exactly.
And it's just a lot easier and faster because I'm doing it. But when you go into anything that has history, anything that existed before you, and you want to create something, you have to pay homage to what's been.
Fair.
Or else you can't properly engineer anything in that environment. And I think the skill set is incredibly important. Yes, I care deeply about developers' ability to create software, and I think that is definitely the heart of developer advocacy.
Everybody should. It's a management misnomer, and the people who get it really get it. But it's like, take the NBA. When in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, they were still public chartering their flights, right? So it's just like Michael Jordan was getting on a plane, on a United plane at O'Hare, and they were flying commercial to Jersey to play the Nets. Then they were flying or taking a bus to Madison Square Garden to play them. Then flying charter. All these 6'8", 7-foot giants in coach seats and first class seats because they don't have the money. I believe the first team to fly private was the Detroit Pistons in the bad boy era. So that's mid to late 80s. That's late 80s then. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the numbers and you look at the games, you know why Bill Laimbeer had the ability to punch people nonstop every time they came into the league? He was well rested. Every time he got on that private plane, he's chilling. So clearly the ownership of the Pistons said, you know what? If I want my players to play better, I should probably upgrade the things they have available to them. And we see it, hey, you know, the Power 5 colleges that do really well, the Michigans, the Texas, the U of M. You ever seen their weight rooms?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, hey, if I want the product
They're
on
beautiful.
the field, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of these other schools can't compete. You get donor money, it goes crazy. But they go, hey, if I have masseuses, I have PTs on staff, if I have nutritionists on staff, if I have all these, this is at a place, level where the players aren't even being paid to do this by the schools. So we'll talk about pro sports and the way that they give it up for the nutrition and all that other stuff. But it's a clear understanding, at least in athletics, that if I invest in my players, the result I get back will be that much more. Management in other ways does not see it in the same way. It's just like, do something with it.
That's a funny illustration, and I ask a follow-up question to you. Is
Yeah.
that what I love it? I love the illustration that engineers, software engineers, whatever, are the equivalent to these players, right? Professional players.
Yeah.
Is that how it is? Is that how they should be viewed? Is that what you think, as these types of personas?
I think not necessarily in the persona, because here's the thing. They're treating some of them like it anyway.
Oh, 100%. At the top of it, 100%.
Yeah. But don't give the tech lead access to the masseuse and nutritionist, and don't give it to the rest of the team, because you're going to end up with one Bron and a whole, I ain't going to throw nobody else under the bus with the rest of everybody else, but and a whole bunch of G League 500K veteran minimum players behind them. And then you going to get upset. Yeah. Because here's the other thing about developers, and check me if I'm wrong, but just like athletes, most prefer to play with talent that makes sense for their talent.
Yeah.
So it's only going to be so long that developer is tired of dragging along the rest of the players. And then you're going to have to go back to the table. Okay, don't leave. Here's more money. Okay, don't leave. Here's more vacation. Meanwhile, you're already in a way giving information and education. You know, I got the lunch and learns and all this other stuff, because you're trying to infer a culture of continuous learning. But what are you doing for the things they actually have their hands on? It's like, I guess, from athlete to change the example again, it's like, if I'm a construction company, am I giving you Klein tools, or am I giving you the crappy joints out the dollar store? Do I expect the same work that comes out of both of them? I probably shouldn't. So am I giving the correct tools? Am I constantly in search of the correct tools? That way the developers have what they need to do their job effectively.
It's interesting. Like, going further with this illustration, I think it goes really well, especially at the top of like the talent pool. The people who love the game of let's just say software engineering as a whole. The people that love the game,
Yeah.
and have dedicated a lot of time to the game, and are pursuing those big FANG jobs, or just like at the top of the compensation ladder wherever they go.
Yep.
100%. And there's also the people who are okay being third string, riding the bench, and
Big
like
facts.
just living their life. You're like, yeah, I'm in the NBA, but like, you don't really know me.
Yeah.
But like, that's okay. And maybe they're happy with that, maybe they're not, for whatever reason, etc. I like thinking about, I think you do have to be aware of what talent pool you're playing in. though.
Absolutely.
If you're working at a big like FANG company, or at like a very high tech spot, startup or otherwise,
You're around,
and you're going to be pulling talent just because they think what you're working on is interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
A lot of the time is like, and of course, all the other benefits and perks are beneficial. Like that, you definitely need that too.
Yeah.
Because they will go somewhere else and be making a considerable amount of money.
Yeah.
100%. And I think it's cool to draw that distinction because there's a lot of people that just don't care.
Facts.
And I kind of like the internal developer platform, I think should honestly cater to all of those people. I don't, because they all end up producing software because the big companies that like, you know, major banks or the FedExes of the world, where it's like you go there, it's not really that exciting. Like, the stuff isn't that exciting. Like, it's like, I'm here for a job. It's kind of cool, whatever. But like,
and depending on what team you're working on, you might be working for a solution that supports the solution that supports the solution. Like you don't even, I work for the API that triggers this service that feeds into this thing that people across the country use to make decisions.
And honestly, the people, if we're really keeping it hot, the people that are at the top, at the LeBron levels, they already automated away that pain for themselves.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
They wrote that code and figured it out. It was honestly just a nuisance on the way to getting the job done. The problem is when you replicate that at a scale and you try to do that with, you know, folks that aren't even interested in operating at that level because of the time commitment. Just how much it takes to be operating at that level.
Absolutely.
Right. So a lot of that is it's this weird balance. The vast majority of our industry is not those people. That's a challenge in and of itself. Those people are at the FAANG companies or a high-tech startup of some sort or starting their own startup of some sort. Like that's where a lot of those reside.
Yeah.
You still have a plethora of very good engineers everywhere else who just don't want to worry about those things.
Yeah.
And those companies don't want to pay for those people. And those people are annoying in a lot of ways in of themselves as much as I love them. Right? There's pros and cons to both sides. You're going to have to deal with this guy is going to, like, he may not like people.
Yeah.
Okay? He may be difficult to manage. You're going to have to just deal with some stuff, but he's going to sling code like no one you've ever known ever. He's going to push every single person on your team, even though they look at him as like that guy's kind of a jerk. They're going to be better after working with him for a few months.
I'll tell you a quick story. My first job when I moved out here, I was responsible for the installing of like Wi-Fi hubs and routers and like retirement homes, apartment buildings and stuff like that. We had a gentleman who I later found out had Asperger's, but he was responsible for a lot of the networking, a lot of the switching, configuring, stuff like that, right? And at this point in time, I was not familiar with Asperger's and how it can manifest itself in a person. And
that's autism, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And he had a moment and he just ripped into a customer. And I'm like, not knowing that he's suffering, or I don't think you could say suffering with autism, that he's dealing with this, the way that his mind spins in this way. I'm like, oh, snap, bro, it's tripping. Sure. And I'm like, oh, there's no way they don't fire him. So I come back the next day and I'm just like, all right, he's not here. And they're like, yeah, he's taking some time away. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. 2 days later, I come back in. He's right back on them switches going crazy. Yeah. And they're just like, I'm like, what's... And then I'm actually watching him work. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Have you seen The Good Doctor?
I've seen clips of it.
The Good Doctor is a great example of this. You know, if y'all don't know The Good Doctor, autistic surgeon, brilliant. Struggles with
person-to-person communication.
Social aspect of his job a lot of the time. Gets better over the seasons, but still struggles because he has autism. So the thing, I actually think that there's not, if we talk about just the undiagnosed side of it, there's like a ton of that. But also in our field, the prevalence of neurodivergency of all sorts.
Yup.
Autism, ADD, ADHD, and all of the others.
All the spectrum.
Is in mass.
Absolutely.
It takes a certain type of mind to actually be entranced by these things.
Agreed.
And that mind happens, it's just my observation, very anecdotal. I'm curious in the comments if you agree with me, happens to be neurodivergent a lot. And I know I fit in that category.
Oftentimes, absolutely.
Like ADD, ADHD, all that good stuff. And that's what I'm saying. At the top of those levels, yeah, it's going to be folks like that. The folks that have all of it, the ability to do that and the social aspect, those are the ones who end up CEOs running companies.
CTOs, all that.
CEOs, CTOs, and they're doing their thing, right? And you don't, you aren't bothered being around them and in social interactions. But if you want to navigate this space and create products for these folks and care for them and actually advocate for them, that's just part of what you have to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're your best performers.
Absolutely. That's like, talk about how important that was for me, because I've dove a lot further into neurodivergency from the sake of ADHD and autism in recent months. But when I was first starting out, like I was not aware that this was a thing. But if there's anything that I can say I was taught from an early age, I understood from an early age, was emotional intelligence. My wife, we figure out later in her adulthood that she has ADHD, but I always used to say, and I know this sounds crazy, but I tell her all the time, I said, I did not marry you for your intelligence, like your, I say AI, but what's
IQ?
Your IQ. I did not marry you for your IQ. Your EQ, however,
Crazy.
oh my Lord. And these are the things that, like, I'm the exact opposite. I just don't pick up on. I need you, because when I walk through a room and I'm just like, she's just like, she's about to have a panic attack. I'm like, what are you talking? And like, before I can even get back to it, I'm just like, how did you know? But she sees and she pays attention to these things. So my ability to see these things as a result of my relationship with her has grown. And I easily find out through my working and being responsible for teams, hey, if you learn about people, you learn how to deal with people, and you learn how to cover for people, the things that they are willing to do in response are always going to carry on down. Because I personally believe, as an agilist at any level, your number one responsibility is to protect your team. And that means different things for different teammates. For the neurodivergent person who, hey, I'll sit on these keys for 10 hours. Please don't make me talk to anybody. Hey, he don't present. Perfectly fine.
Yep.
For the person
he doesn't want to.
He don't have to. Because here's the thing. Somebody here wants FaceTime. Somebody here wants to move up. It's clearly not them.
Yeah.
So we're going to leave them exactly where they want to be. And in the event that they change their mind, we'll help them get there. But for right now, that's not their responsibility. You, the one who barely code, but always wants to talk. Hey, that's your job now. Guess what?
Yeah.
And that means that you two need to work together so that you understand the bones of what they built and you can present it in a way that they appreciate. The person who only wants to talk to leadership, or the person who only wants to talk to other teams, wants to know what they're doing, so we're kept up abreast, we know how we can maneuver through different teams. Okay, that's your responsibility. And as long as you can keep people, and you have to have that constant communication because interests change, you often find that it's the different, that kind of wraps back around to the original point. It's the idea of managing people. It's the idea of making sure people have adequate information and tools at their disposal, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is working software in the hands of customers. Because if we don't have that, we're not getting a check on the 1st and 15th. That's just kind of how that works.
Yep.
So, and I'm down with anything that gets quality software to them faster. If that means that we need to take a look at our infrastructure and the way that we're building things and pushing them out, yeah, we need to come back to the table and discuss these policies. If it means that we got to go back and hit the talent pools, maybe in some situations we might have to change our policies on how people work, where people work. I just read a article the other day that said the biggest jump and change and people even looking at jobs is flexible work scheduling. He's like, of course, compensation is always going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
People got bills to pay.
Yeah.
Room for growth is always going to be number 2 on that list. Am I just stuck in this role, or whatever the case may be? But they're like, the amount of people who A, are leaving jobs because they're being forced back into the office, or B, aren't even considering other jobs because they're not flexible, their hybrid system sucks, or they're even just not fully remote. There's a subset of people out there who won't even look at the job if it's not remote. I think you're one of those people. I'm gonna be one of them people. Yeah. I'm gonna be one of them people.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I got a few more car payments to make before I'm one of them people, but I'm eventually gonna be one of them people, because if there's anything the last 3 years showed is that y'all don't need me in office. And when you reach the level in which I work, where if there's anything, I'll speak specifically about my situation. I love where I work because, like I said here before, I'm a rogue agent. Mm-hmm. I have cover. They say, "Hey man, drop down and dissolve that government and build a new one." And what that also means is that the people who align to the same manager, I don't work with them on a day-to-day unless we're talking policy, we're talking requirements, we're trying to build a new scale for the rest of the enterprise. That's the only time I deal with them. But 95% of my day, I spend on the phone with people in Mexico, in Brazil, in California, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, weird enough. But in all these different places.
That's the office, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what y'all need me in the building for? Mm-hmm. But you got to play the game. You go through all that things. So that's why I say, when I look at the level of which, because here on out, like, I can't even say this because you remember Tom, friend.
Yeah, I do.
I remember he was coaching somewhere and he came and talking to me and he was just like, I miss being a scrum master. I'm like, you are agile coach galore. Like, you gonna talk about a legend in the game. Everybody in the South, he speak at conferences. Everybody in the Southeast know Tom. What do you mean you miss being at the team level? He was like, you'll never get those connections back. Everything past that point becomes very, very political. Got to play by the board and do those things. And the thing that makes you fall in love with it, you'll soonly be without. So I say, from a perspective of pay, this is I can't work for a team level again because my skill set doesn't represent that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be in this position for the rest of my life, to where I'm either working with people who are located in multiple different places, or I don't need to constantly be in one place physically, because we're most likely going to be distributed.
It makes sense. For me, I look at remote work like this. If you want me in an office, it better be because we're building something so new.
Fair.
So different.
Fair.
That it require. I think there is something to be said for when you're creating something that hasn't been created before. There is a niceness to having that initial part of it in an office, but that fades, that need, because as soon as the work is defined and you go to accomplishing your tasks, you can do the vast majority of all that remote. So and I mean, my company is a good testament of that, of like a remote first company who building products remotely. Now, you do end up having to come together at certain times, and that's great. But my problem with a lot of these companies, and this is no hate to the company I'm about to say, but like I turned down the whole like interview for Google thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I'd interview with them again, but I did in this case because when we're talking about the work schedule, it was like 3 days a week in the office, hybrid. And it was like they wanted to interview me for this like customer engineering type role. And so I asked them, I was like, so when I'm in the office, like what am I doing in the office? Who am I interacting with? It's just like, being around your teammates. But it's not like I'm not building any real like new cutting edge software. I'm basically Google's version of a solutions or sales engineer.
Copy. I'm going in to get on Zoom.
So it's a policy.
Or Hangouts.
Yeah, it's
I'm
a
going
policy
in the
that
office
you have
to turn on my camera and get on Hangouts.
We invested all this money in offices. We
Absolutely.
have gyms and like
Facts.
food and like all this stuff, and
Which I wouldn't be mad at doing.
we
that,
pay for
but-
exactly.
Yeah,
It's a nice thing, right?
Yeah.
But for me, being at home and being able to be in the same place my daughter is, and being able to go out and see her during the day. And she was even younger at the time, and she's still very young. That trade-off didn't make sense for me.
Makes perfect.
Now, there could be a time in my life where that trade-off does make sense, where it is fine because of whatever reasons. Certain things change. But I think that companies are really making a mistake in just requiring it just because, without taking those considerations into play. Like, you will lose. And my boss, my current boss, actually tweeted about this recently. He was like, and I think he said this pretty much this exact thing. I'll paraphrase. First, you'll lose your top talent. They'll go somewhere else that's remote. First off, then the people that stay, other people will leave slowly, right, as they find other work slowly, and all you'll be left with is the people that can't leave. The people, the lowest performers in your company. That's who you'll be left with.
Yeah.
It's a massive mistake. And all because of what? Like, you bought this building? Like, you tell an employee that, we didn't tell you to do that.
You're right. But see that, well, it's like, that's the very obvious reason, but you're not telling us that. You're telling it's to foster collaboration. You're telling us that all these other corporate HR speak for, we're locked into this lease for another 5 years, dog. We need you to be here.
And that stuff only makes sense.
Butts and seats.
If you're on a team, right, where 3 days a week we come in and we're like hardcore ideation, we're figuring out like bunch of whiteboard sessions because we're trying to all figure out what we haven't created. Honestly, you're going to do that. You should probably be in the office full time at that point. And you're going to need to do that for maybe 2 weeks to a month before you figure out and define the problem. And then after that, you may need to get together for a couple weeks out of every quarter because you're doing the work. But you put all these blanket rules on it and like I said, it becomes disingenuous because you're not taking into consideration that.
Exactly.
If you were, the companies that I think are doing it the best are the companies who leave it up to the management directly, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, you're going to have to then face, well, why does this team get to work remote and why don't we get to work remote? And you say, if you want to be on this team, we're trying to do something that they're not.
Yep.
And you have to, that's difficult. You have to navigate that. That's another challenge.
Indeed.
Right? I think it's a worthwhile challenge.
Yeah.
And the talent that you'll attract when you're building a product that requires that is worth that fight, that back and forth. And otherwise, there's a difference between getting software off the ground and then operating software.
Indeed.
Like getting software off the ground, getting like everything from R&D to like we're initial release, probably up to release 1.0. At that point, right, that's like getting it off the ground. You could even argue it stops a little before that. Like once you get to release, if you do like a .1 to .16, just to say, and then version 1 is after that, you might it might be off the ground and pretty good in a semi-stable spot at .3.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just say half of that .8. Now you're operating. Now you're adding the bones that you feel like this needs to be there for like a certain level of scale.
Sounds like you're preparing for scale.
You're preparing for scale before we get to .1. Okay, so let's include all of that, whatever.
Yeah.
Right up to version 1. That may be getting off the ground. I really think the people that are on the team up to version 3 to 5, in that illustration, that's really the getting it off the ground because they lay the foundational groundwork for all the other engineers to pick up with and start, creating features.
Yeah.
Those people right there in the 0.1 to .5. Yeah, they're probably going to want to be in a room. There's going to be a lot of collaboration. Exactly. They don't even have to, and I want to be very clear with this. It's been done, and it is being done without that, but I can see your argument.
Absolutely.
I can see your argument as to why it'd be beneficial. I still wouldn't require it, but I can see your argument, and I'd even be okay with it under certain circumstances. After that, you're operating software. You're creating new things, yes, but you're still operating. There's not as many unknowns. There are still some, but you have processes in place for discovery. You have a team in place that can actually handle this work. You know how to divvy stuff up. Like you're figuring stuff out still, but you're operating. Yeah. Then .1 and past that, you're operating. If you're really just in the operating mode, I don't understand why you need to be in person. Hey,
no, I'm in the same thought.
These companies are going to unfortunately probably learn a lot of this the hard way.
Yeah, they are.
And they'll
turnover rate
figure
is crazy
it out
right now.
You said what's
The
crazy?
turnover rate is crazy right now.
Yeah.
And people are just like, oh, people are without jobs oftentimes because of the current state of the economy, which is in part true. But a lot of people, and I used to make this joke during the pandemic, but I'm just like, if all these companies are reporting ticks in productivity and the quality of work is rising as well, and they're doing it while parents are being lunch ladies, while parents are being English teachers, while parents are being full-time maids, because it's different when like your kid go to school, you can kind of get home, mess with, like, clean up everything, and then no, kids are just crazy, and all day things are going crazy, and I'm not only increasing my work level and quality, but I'm handling all that. Just imagine when she's not a part-time lunch lady, or he's not a part-time principal, or a part-time janitor, and now he gets to fully throw onto his work. And I just feel like the second that a lot of companies got the opportunity to, they just, what was actually more annoying than them just pulling the wool and making a change, I kind of would have preferred that it was the dance a lot of companies did. Like, we're still trying to figure it out. You know good and well he was going to pull us back, dog. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how this new norm is going to work. And
nonsense.
The second y'all, hey, when CDC say it's straight, we bite.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Hey, man.
No, well, we're actually at an hour already, which is surprising. But I want to try and maybe like keep it at around an hour.
I agree. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and hopefully that'll make it a little easier for y'all.
Digestible,
too.
Baby.
But I think today was a great conversation. I think that the platform engineering conversation is really interesting. Let us know in the comments if there's anything specifically that you want to hear more about, or whatever, or want to be another topic. Any closing statements?
No. Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, like, share, subscribe. Appreciate y'all. Bye.